Now it's time for our keynote speaker, is Rona Sampson, our 2011 Equal Opportunity Day speaker. She is the Vice President for Development and Marketing for the San Diego Center for Children, a 124-year-old nonprofit helping children thrive whose trauma, abuse, or mental health challenges delay their ability to succeed. The center is the oldest children's charity in San Diego, and it provides critically needed services for special needs children. Rona loves the children the center helps, and she appreciates all the efforts of the volunteers and the donors that help those children succeed. Early in her career, she was a patrol officer, undercover narcotics officer, and patrol sergeant with the New York City Police Department, and was awarded the National Improvement of Justice Award for her work. She's active in the San Diego community, and she's involved in a number of volunteer efforts in support of children, as well as the arts. She was also an international crime consultant. Her work took her throughout the United States and several other countries. She spent more than 25 years working with police, city administrators, schools, university, and community groups on policing strategies and crime reduction. She's the author of numerous U.S. Department of Justice publications on reducing specific crime and safety problems, and even drug dealing in privately owned apartment complexes. She's a founding member of the Center for Problem-Oriented Policing, the National Go-To Center for Crime Reduction Strategies. She has a bachelor's from Barnard College, Columbia University, and a law degree from Harvard Law School. Please welcome our 2011 speaker, Rona Sampson.
Thank you so much for inviting me today. I can't tell you how much of an honor this is. I want to particularly thank Ignacio de la Torre and Ray King because they both do so much to make San Diego a better place. The work still needs to be done, but they are in the business of doing that, and I really appreciate it. In the time I have with you today, I want to talk about the importance of a level playing field, the importance of equal opportunity, a topic each of you knows a lot about. Each of you, no doubt, has had to work hard for. Equal opportunity means different things to different people, and the work that the Urban League does and many other great organizations do to try to achieve social and economic equality is critically important. I was born in 1958, and like many others, each of us has a story, and just like many others, I was poor. My mom was not able to care for us, and my dad left us. My two sisters and I landed in an orphanage. And in the orphanage, they separated all of us from one another. At that point, my life could have gone south, because no matter how good the agency or organization, there is not a level playing field for children in foster care. There is not equality of opportunity. They too often end up as a statistic, and they are way overrepresented in the U.S. prison system. My grandmother saved us. Well, actually, her brother-in-law. My grandmother's sister was married to a lawyer, and she begged him to try and get us out of the orphanage. And he worked for months and months and months to get us out of there. And I'm sure it was a wonderful place, but it's not a place for children. So my grandmother saved us, and my grandmother raised us until my mom was able to come back home. My dad eventually came back home too, although that was a mixed blessing. I knew from an early age that I owed other people a lot for rescuing us. And I owed a lot to New York City, where I grew up, for having good public schools and lots of free things to do to keep me busy, to uplift me, to educate me, and yes, to civilize me. When my dad died when I was 15 years old and I started acting out, even though we were poor, my mom was able to reach out to her brother who lived in California then and he flew me out to California to live with his family for a summer, and I babysat my cousins, which kept me out of trouble. Once again, I was rescued, and it made me look at things differently. I knew that I had to give back, and I knew that I needed to spend my entire career giving back. After college, I had a fellowship to work in New York City government, and it was a terrific job. I worked in the mayor's office, and I worked on community development issues. But one thing was happening in New York. Buildings in poor neighborhoods, apartment buildings in poor neighborhoods were being burnt down by landlords who found it more economically advantageous to burn down their own buildings for insurance money and displace all these poor people, all these families, all these children in exchange for insurance money. So I decided I needed to do something about it, and I became a cop in New York City in 1982, 29 years ago. I became a cop because I wanted to rescue neighborhoods that were burning. When I joined, there were few women in the police department. In my class, we ended up bringing up the number of women in the police department to 3%, which is still very small. There was not a level playing field for women in that department. Many male cops didn't think women should be cops, and many male supervisors felt the same way, and some of them told us how they felt. But a number of things happened when I became a cop. I noticed some things right away that made me wonder how things could be different. I'd been a history major in college, and I didn't really think of myself as naive about police, even about the problems they caused to civil rights demonstrators. But when I joined, it was 1982, but I was still surprised by what I found. If you need the police, things can work out okay. They do. Police rescue people. They rescue people from drowning or jumping off bridges. They rescue people, they save lives, they do a lot of good in our society. But it turns out it's so much more complicated than that. Things can unravel. They can unravel enormously when you call the police to your home. Ultimately, I ended up thinking that police were using too few tools. After all, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. The poor are the biggest consumers of police service. They use the police because the service is free. They use the service to settle disputes, rein in errant children, deal with family members who have mental illness, all because they cannot afford other types of professionals to do so. I'm going to go through a few comparisons now to show you the inequalities this causes. If you're a middle class or rich and your parents have marital problems, they go to a counselor. They go to a therapist. But if you are poor and the arguments are noisy or loud, the cop comes to your house. And if a cop comes to your house, a couple of things can happen. And sometimes it's not so good. If your parents are middle class or rich and your sibling has a drug problem, your parents send your sister to drug rehab, and maybe even your parents' health care plan will cover the cost. The police aren't involved. It is treated as a health care problem. But if you are poor and your brother has a drug problem, he's likely to end up getting arrested. And even in jail, he was pretty unlikely to get any drug treatment at all. And if he's convicted, he has a criminal record as well as an unattended drug problem. Let's look at another example. If your parents are middle class or rich, and you have a sibling who has mental health problems, then your parents get your sibling into special programs to help meet her needs. Some parents even hire an advocate to to help advocate for their special needs child with the school district, and that child gets the extra special help and the right placement in the right school. But if you are poor and your brother's mental health problems are left undiagnosed because your family has little or inadequate health care, then it's a different story. And if your brother's behavior is off the charts, then the police are called. And if the police are called to deal with your brother's mental health problems in the U.S., it's not good. Right now, 20% of the U.S. prison system are people who have diagnosed mental health problems. So right now, we have foster children who are in prison. We have people with mental health problems and children in prison. And let me give you a few more examples. If you are middle class or better off and your child attends a good public school, that good school lifts every child in that school up. And if you're middle class and you're not that good in school, as good as your classmates, your parents hire a personal tutor for you. But if you're poor, you are in a poor performing school, it brings lots of kids down. You are lost among the other kids, and your parents can't afford a tutor for you, so what ends up happening is the farther behind you are left, the more likely you are to drop out. That's another chunk of people overrepresented in the U.S. prison system: illiterates and high school dropouts. Inequality has severe outcomes. In this country, we like to say that everyone needs to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And certainly, there is truth to that. But what is also true is that everyone also needs rescuing at some point in their lives. But I want to make a specific point here. The issue is, if the system or the government is your rescuer, oftentimes they as institutions are inadequate to the task because the task is too complex to be handled by systems rather than people. Foster care cannot substitute for a grandma. Rescuers need to be people who step in and help out. That is why the initiatives the Urban League in San Diego is involved with are so important. The work the Urban League is doing in youth mentoring for kids whose poor school attendance, academic problems, or disciplinary history place them at risk for a downward slide, it's so important to be involved in those. That's why it's so important, the Women's Reentry Program the Urban League is working on. So for me, after I saw the disparities I saw as a cop, I decided to change things. Along with a group of 5 others, we started a movement in policing. We called it problem-oriented policing. And it was a movement to focus police on effectiveness and to move away from responding based on emotions and bias. We said that if police develop a body of knowledge about crime problems, then it can help remove the emotions and the bias from their decisions. We started the Center for Problem-Oriented Policing. We researched the best ways to reduce specific crime problems. Oftentimes, rather than arrest, which marks people for life, we offered evidence-based ways to reduce crime problems. Let me give you an example. In New York City, each year, they arrest tens of thousands of people who jump over the turnstiles in the subway system. Rather than building better turnstiles that you can't jump over, tens of thousands of people each year end up with arrests on their record for something that could be prevented by doing something different. We researched the best ways to reduce specific crime problems, and we found them. We provided for free over 80 guidebooks on how to reduce specific crime problems. These are all now published by the U.S. Department of Justice. We gave cops tools, not all of them use it, but we gave cops tools, not just hammers, precise tools for complicated situations. At the Center for Problem-Oriented Policing, which is a virtual online center, all the publications are free. And we have had more than 500,000 downloads of these publications, and our work has been translated into nearly a dozen languages by police officials in other countries as well. Keep in mind, I would not have been involved in this endeavor of changing how police respond if I had not been rescued. 5 years ago, I started volunteering at the San Diego Center for Children. Now I work there full-time. It was just a place I really couldn't resist. As the person who introduced me said, we help children thrive whose trauma, abuse, or mental health problems have delayed their ability to succeed. I used to think when I was a cop that when we rescued a kid from a family who was abusing or neglecting the child, that it was a good thing and that we had saved the child. I had no idea the trauma the child experiences afterwards, and if they are placed in multiple foster care homes, how they start falling apart home by home. I thought in my naive way we had rescued them. Rescued. Now I know that it's so much more complicated than that. I agreed to this speech for two reasons. One is that I think Ignacio de la Torre is one of the most decent and caring people in San Diego. The other is because I know that the Urban League is trying to push for a greater understanding in the community about the need for great foster families, ones that don't relinquish kids when kids start showing behavior problems. We need more really good people to get involved, and I am here to tell you that there is a very, 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 very important and critical need to create an equality of opportunity out there for children who land through no fault of their own in foster care. So what does equality of opportunity sometimes mean? It means reforming systems, but it also means rescuing people. And it especially means rescuing children so they can have the equality of opportunity to reach their potential. Thank you for being involved with the Urban League's programs, because to be in the business of trying to achieve social and economic opportunity also means that you have to be in the business of rescuing people, which is one of the noblest businesses around. Thank you very much.